For the past few months, we have been looking at the subject of marriage. And for the last 2 weeks, we've been looking at the subject of LoveDare, the LoveDare. And what we've tried to do is show how love is not just said in words, but how it's expressed in action. And we've used as our text in this particular lesson, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4 through 8. And last week, we finished by looking at love does not seek its own. And we talked about the danger of self-centeredness and of looking at self at the expense of our mate, and how it can erode love and respect and happiness, and how it can cause problems in marriage. Does your mate see you as selfish? If I were to ask your husband, ask your wife, is your mate selfish? Is it all about them? What would they say? Would you be afraid of what they said? And if you would, maybe you need to make some changes in that area, and you'll find that if you treat her different, treat him different, then they may respond to you differently. Again, we need to look at the principles established in the Scripture. Love is not provoked. James 1:19 through 20 says, "So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath, for the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God." Now notice, love is not provoked. Primarily to sharpen, metaphorically signifying to rouse to anger, to provoke. And the passive voice in Acts 17:16 was provoked, was stirred. In 1 Corinthians 13:5 is not provoked. It's in a negative sense. Love is hard to offend and quick to forgive. Love does not try to provoke ill feelings in a marriage. We can produce ill feeling by our actions, by our words, by the tone of our voice, by the things that we say and the things that we do. When we're not considerate, when we're harsh in our reply, when we're quick, when we jump the gun, and when we don't demonstrate kindness, what that does is it provokes. It provokes the wrong response. See, we want the response to be with love. We want the things that we do in marriage to be responded by love, an act of love, not by anger, not by jealousy, not by sadness, not by tears. We don't want to provoke those kinds of reactions, because that's going to harm the relationship. And so we need to be careful that our actions, our words, and our actions can provoke our mate in the wrong way. And it can have disastrous effect in the relationship. It indicates insecurity and stress. Love is not provoked. We don't do things to cause problems in the marriage. This has to go with something we talked earlier about finances. You know, we learn to live within our means. When we make major purchases, we plan it out and we talk about it and we discuss it. And both people are on board, and we have a plan, and we're going to work together to do the plan. We have to not add additional stress in the marriage. There's going to be stress in marriage without adding to it by bad choices, by bad decisions, by bad actions, by unkind words, by not being very considerate. And then we're going to place other problems in the marriage that could be avoided if we would avoid certain types of action. Indicates bitterness in Ephesians chapter 4, in verse number 31. It says, "Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you." This is something that indicates bitterness. If we provoke our mate in a negative way, we're going to promote bitterness in them. They're going to become bitter towards us, and their feelings are going to become one of bitterness, not happiness, not joy, not peace, not security, not love. You're going to provoke a different reaction, and that's going to cause a problem and struggle in your marriage. Indicates selfish lust. We need not to provoke our mate by doing dumb things. You know, when you're married and you have a wife and you have a husband, you're off the market. You shouldn't be looking at other women. You shouldn't be looking at other men. You should not be jealous of other men's wives or other men's husbands, other wives' husbands. We've got to be very careful that we don't provoke a reaction by unconsciously doing things that demonstrate to our mate that we're not happy within the relationship that we have. It indicates selfish lust. James 4 says, "You ask amiss because you ask to consume it on your selfish lust." Again, When we are focused on ourselves, then we're going to have disaster within the marriage. Indicates pride. When we provoke people in a negative way, it means that our pride is overrode our common sense. And we got so much pride, we won't admit we're wrong. We won't admit that we handled the situation wrong. We won't admit that we spoke too quick, or we spoke out of turn, or we spoke harshly, or we did something that caused our mate to be unhappy because of how we addressed her, or what we said and how we said it. And so we've got to be very careful that we don't provoke bad reaction by our conduct, by our words, by our deeds. That we've got to be very careful that our deeds and our words express love in everything we say and do. And when we don't, then we're going to provoke a response that's not going to be helpful within the relationship. We don't provoke our mate to have responses that are going to be harmful to the relationship. Anger, resentment, hurt, bitterness. All those things bring negative things into the relationship. And so we're going to have to be very careful that we provoke good things, not bad things. You know, in Hebrews 10 it says to provoke one another to love and good works. You know, we are to provoke people in a positive way, in a positive reaction. Again, when we provoke them by love, by kindness, by being long-suffering, by being tender, by demonstrate love by our actions and our words, we're going to provoke reciprocal action. But if we provoke people in a negative way, then we're going to bring harmful things into the relationship that's going to destroy the cohesiveness of that relationship. It's going to erode love, it's going to erode respect, and over time, we're going to drift apart instead of drifting together. And so we've got to be very careful about these things. Love thinks no evil. Proverbs 10 verse 12, hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all sin. Vincent's word studies in the New Testament says, reckons not the evil, taketh not an account of the evil, namely that which is done to love. Love instead of entering evil as a debt in its account. Book voluntarily passes the sponge over what is endured. Now what's all that mean? Well, Barnes-Noble says it means that love, or that a person under the influence of love is not malicious, censorious, disposed to find fault, or impute improper motive to others, until we are compelled to do so by the most infraggable evidence. Again, love thinks no evil. We don't jump to conclusions in things. We don't render harsh conclusions without having the facts. Again, sometimes we get misinformation. Sometimes we don't have all the information. And therefore, we reach bad conclusions that cause a lot of problems in our marriage. Let's just use an example that the wife is out one day and she goes to, she's going into a restaurant to eat, and lo and behold, there's her husband with two other women. Now again, she doesn't know anything. She doesn't know anything about why that is, and yet could she jump to the conclusion that what is going on, and could it cause a negative reaction and her feelings towards her husband? Well, what if she went over there and said she was, and he introduces them, and both of those are business associates that came in from the higher office, and they were just enjoying lunch together and talking about business. That's all it was. It was nothing else. And yet, what if she'd have let her mind run away with her and think that her husband was out being unfaithful, or with women because he was not happy and content at home? You see how all of that could cause a great deal of problem? Our mate's late. You know, he's really usually on time, and for some reason he's late. He doesn't come in on time. And we begin to let our mind run away with what's going on, and we begin to think things we shouldn't think. We don't have any evidence, but we begin to think that maybe something is going on, and we accuse him of something without basing it upon any facts. And the same thing could be for a man and his wife. He could base some things upon some superficial evidence or some circumstantial things that he sees, and he could charge her or accuse her of doing things that she not only hadn't done, she hadn't even thought about doing it. What does that say about trust? What does that say about love? What does that say about the love and respect that we have for each other, and the trust in the relationship? And so we got to be very careful that we get all the facts, we garner them before we reach conclusions that will cause hard feelings and erode love in our marriage. It means that I'm not going to think the worst. I'm going to think the better. You know, sadly, I'm afraid that so many people today, they want to think the worst instead of the better. They'll jump to the worst possible conclusion before thinking of something that may be more positive. We just always go to the extreme negative, and that's very dangerous in a marriage. There's a basis of trust in a marriage. I trust my wife. I trust her impeccably. I would never, if I saw something that I didn't understand, I would never jump to the gun that she was doing something wrong. I would never do that because I trust her, and because she's demonstrated over time that she loves me, and I have nothing to fear about that. And so again, that's something that we need to consider, and we don't need to let our mind go someplace where it doesn't need to go, because that's going to erode love and respect in the marriage. Love does not dwell on evil that has occurred. You know, we make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And you know, husband, we'll say things that we probably shouldn't have said, or we'll say them in a tone that we shouldn't have said. And maybe wives have said something in a moment of anger that was very humiliating and very cutting, and they didn't think about it. They didn't think it through, and then they had to back up and they had to apologize, and they do, and we correct the behavior. But we can't let it linger. We can't hold a grudge, and we can't just never let that go, because that's going to cause problems in the marriage. Some like to keep score of the wrongs done. To bear a grudge is not in the character of love. You know, you're going to have to be careful that you don't bear a grudge, and you don't hold somebody against something and you told them that you forgive them, but you never really did, because you just hold that in the back of your head, and you can't let that thing go. Well, if you do that, you're going to erode the love in the marriage. And by the way, if you do that, then the next time they make a mistake, they're not going to be forthcoming with it, because they know what you'll do. And so again, that won't be right, but that will be the reaction because of the way you handle the last problem or mistake that was made. And so we've got to be understanding, and we've got to be forgiving. The Bible says if we won't forgive others, then God will not forgive us. And that's true in a marriage. If you don't forgive your mate, God's not going to forgive you. Now again, there are different degrees of that. There are certain situations where we can forgive, but there also may be consequences because of our actions. That's another entirely different story. But when we forgive our mate, then we need to forget it, and we need to move on. And we don't need to hold it as a grudge. Love prevents bitterness and resentment. You know, we need to work very hard not to cause our mate to have resentment towards us or bitterness, because we're unyielding, we're unforgiving, and we just never let something die, and we just keep pounding it and drilling it. And when you do that, what you're doing, you're destroying love, you're destroying respect, you're destroying happiness, and inevitably it's going to cause a rift in the marriage. Are you more likely to remember the wrongs done by your spouse or the good? I'm afraid that we're more prone to remember the wrongs than the good, than all the good things they do. We want to focus on the wrong. Well, that's thinking evil, and that's dangerous. That's going to erode the feelings and the cohesiveness in a marriage relationship. And what it's going to do is going to destroy the contentment, the joy, the tranquility, and the love. Is going to erode that little by little until it destroys it. And so we need to always put things in a positive light, unless we have substantial evidence that points us in another direction. Unless there's convincing, compelling evidence that something is wrong, we should give the benefit of the doubt and think in a positive way. Again, those are decisions we make in our mind. It is what we decide to do in order to do. We have to do that in order to help. We need to help make a fertile place in order that we don't let our minds and our thoughts run away with us. Love does not rejoice in iniquity. 1 Corinthians 5:6, your glorying is not good. Do you not know that a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Vine says this is unrighteousness. Unrighteousness. It means a condition not being right, whether with God, according to the standard of his holiness and righteousness, or with man, according to the standard of what man knows to be right by his own conscience. Love does not rejoice in the sinning, nor with others as they engage in sin. We cannot be happy when people engage in sin. We cannot be happy when people are caught in iniquity. We've got to not be happy about that. If our husband or our wife sins, we can't be happy about that. We can't be glad that there's suffering or there's consequences, and there always will be, but we can't be happy about it. We can't be joyous about it. We can't revel in it that they're going through that, because that doesn't demonstrate love. That doesn't show concern. That doesn't demonstrate kindness. It's just the opposite of all the things that we talked about. Some are happy in sin. And 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 12 says if we're happy in sin, God will love sin as a strong delusion that we'll stay in the sin because we don't love the truth. In 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 12 through 17, it talks about those who get comfortable in sin. And they like it and they revel in it. And then it's going to be hard to bring them out of it. We cannot tolerate sin. 1 Corinthians 5, the church in Corinth was tolerating sin. A man was living with his father's wife. And they were tolerating it. They were putting their head in the sand. They weren't dealing with it. They were ignoring it. And because of that, it was causing a rift in the church. And they were reprimanded by the Apostle Paul that they should turn that one over to Satan. Correct that behavior before he loses his soul. And so we can't tolerate sin. We can have no fellowship with sin. If we have fellowship with sin, God will have no fellowship with us. We must hate sin. And we must not tolerate it, we must not like it, and we must not like those who a spouse determined to live in sin will not be comfortable with their godly mate. Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, a man or a woman in marriage who will conduct themselves in sin, live in sin, act in sin, and be happy with it, is not going to be happy with a godly mate. That's why you need to be very careful that you marry someone that has the same values you do. If somebody that wants to live for themselves and doesn't want to live for God is not going to be happy with the person who lives for God. And the one who lives for God is not going to be very contented and not very happy for somebody that lives for self or lives for the world. And again, there's a reason why there's a danger in that. Because you're talking about two different scenarios. You're talking about two different focuses. And therefore that in and of itself will bring dangerous things within the relationship that will cause uneasiness, that will cause people unhappiness, and over time can destroy the love in the marriage and cause them to drift further and further apart. And so love does not rejoice in iniquity. I'm not glad when my husband makes a mistake. I'm not glad when my wife makes a mistake. I don't try to rub their noses in it. I don't try to badger them about it and berate them about it. We correct it, we learn from it, we move on. That's what we do. If we love the person, we're not happy about it. We are sorrowful because it happened. We repent of it, we correct it, and we learn from it, and we move on. That's what God expects us to do, and that's what you must do in your marriage. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to speak out of turn. We're going to use the wrong tone of voice. We're going to forget something that we shouldn't forget. We're going to say something that we didn't think through very well. That's going to happen. But how you handle it after it happens is going to have a lot to say whether you hurt or help the relationship. We've got to be smarter than that, folks. Love rejoices in the truth. Romans 16:19, for your obedience has become known to all. Therefore I am glad on your behalf, but I want you to be wise in what is good, simple concerning evil. Thayer says, truth as a personal excellence, the candor of mind which is free from affection, pretense, or stimulation of falsehood or deceit. John 8:44 said the devil is a liar. He's a liar from the beginning. There's no truth that resides in him. He's the father of a lie. Sincerity of mind and integrity of character or a mode of life in harmony with divine truth. We need to be happy when our lives are in accordance with God's will. God's word is the ultimate expression of the way things really are. John 17:17, John said, sanctify them through thy word is truth. God's standard is the epitome of what the way things should be. That's the standard we ought to all aim at. That's the standard that we should put everything against. In what God says is right, what God says is honorable, what God says is the proper course to pursue. That's got to be the standard. That's got to be the thing we love. We love to adhere to God's truth, to God's standard, to God's way of doing things. Love rejoices most of the things that please God and celebrate godly conduct in the lives of others. In 2 John 1 verse 4, John said he got great joy of knowing that his children were walking in truth. You see, we should give great credence to the things and celebrate when godly conduct in the life of others. When my husband conducts himself in a godly way, when my wife conducts himself in a godly way, that's something I should be excited about. That's something I should be joyous about. When my husband is taking an active part in the work of the church, when he's doing things in order to grow spiritually and to cause our family to grow spiritually, and when our wives are involved in trying to help others and do what they can to support us and to support the spreading of truth and to encourage people in their faith, that should bring joy in our lives. That should make us happy. That should make us very contented and strengthen our bond one with another. Do you find more joy in your mate's material and secular achievements or in their spiritual achievements? You know, there's nothing wrong with being proud of my mate excelling in secular or in business, but what about spiritually? What about your mate when she is growing or he is growing in their faith toward God, in the way that they do things, in the way that they can contribute to the work, in the things that they can contribute, making our home a godly home, in teaching and instructing our children, in setting an example for our neighbors, in seeking ways to spread the gospel to those outside. Do we joy about that? Do we get great happiness come? Or do we put more weight upon secular achievements? Again, it's not wrong to achieve it secularly or in business, but our spiritual achievement should be top priority. Which is it in your life? Do you get more excited about the material and the business side of it, or do you get more excited about the spiritual achievements of your mate? Again, that shows where your focus is at. Love bears all things, and above all things have fervent love one for another, for the love will cover a multitude of sins. Bind says primarily to protect, to preserve by covering. Hence it means to keep off something which threatens, to bear up against, to hold out against, and so to endure and to bear. 1 Corinthians 9 verse 12. The idea of supporting what is placed upon the thing is prominent in forbearing. See forbearing suffering. Love always protects. There is a need to meet all the adversities in our marriage and stand strong against them. Parasites, unhealthy relationships, dangerous attitudes. Those are things that we're opposed to. Those are things we look out for. Those are things we try to elope and get out of the marriage because they can cause us problems. And so we bear up under all things. Are you willing to remove and put away every influence that can turn your heart away from your mate and steal or hinder your affection for them? If there's something in your life that's taking the love that you have for a mate away from you, are you willing to do whatever is necessary to get that out of your life in order that you might do the things that will promote and strengthen your relationship? You know what? When you become married, you're no longer single. And if your single friends mean more to you and you love spending time with them more than you do your mate, you're going to have a problem. You're going to have a problem if you're always leaving your mate at home so you can go out and be with the boys. So you can go out and do things that you did when you were single and yet leave your mate at home. You're going to create problems within your relationship. Now, are we willing to understand that when we're married, we need to be concerned about the needs of our mate above anything else? And other than God, they need to come top priority. God first and then our mate. And if our action does not stipulate that, if it doesn't demonstrate that, then we're going to have problems within the relationship, and we're going to hinder the love and the respect that we have in it, and it's going to bring us great unhappiness. Love believes all things. Philippians 1 verse 6 says, being confident to this very thing, that he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of Jesus Christ. Thayer, in his Greek lexicon, says that means an ethical sense of confidence in the goodness of men. 1 Corinthians 13 verse 7. Robinson's word picture is not gullible, but has faith in man. Barnes says, must mean that in regard to the conduct of others, there is a disposition to put the best construction on it, to believe that they may be actuated by good motives, and that they intend no injury, and that there is a willingness to suppose, as far as can be understood, that what is done consistently with friendship, good feeling, and with virtue. Love chooses to believe the best about your spouse. It refuses to fill in the unknowns with negative assumptions. We need to think positive. We need to think good things. We need to emphasize good things, and we don't need to put the worst possible connotation on the actions of our mate. And we don't need to spin it in a way that's going to show destructive quality, that's going to harm the love that we have in the marriage. As much as possible, love focuses on the positive. Love looks for the positive to dwell on rather than the negative, and is encouraging. We're going to do things to build up. We're not going to do things to tear down. We're not going to do things to cause love to erode. We're not going to do things that cause respect to erode. And we're not going to put the best possible conclusion on something that we don't have all the facts to. We're going to think in a positive, upward way. And when we don't, then we don't trust our mate. And if we don't trust our mate, then we're going to have problems. And inevitably, we're going to erode happiness and peace within the relationship. What are you doing to help your spouse overcome the problem areas and strengthen their positive attributes? What are you doing? Are you helping it? Are you hindering it? Are you causing it not to even be addressed because you're not concerned with what they're doing and how they're doing? Again, love in action, not just talking about it, but demonstrating it by how you treat them, how you talk to them, and how you interact with them. That tells them a lot about how you feel about them. And if you're not putting them first, it's going to be very evident by the way you talk and treat them and the things that you do. And they'll pick up on that, and that's going to cause problems within the marriage.